This is the face, so it must be the place. What's up, nerds? It's your boy, the OGGM. How you doing today? It's 8:30 in the morning. It's the 12th day of December 2022. It's about 54 degrees and still overcast. It rained again yesterday. Both Steve and I are pretty sleepy because the rain kept us up most of the night. Yeah. It's Monday, so it's time to take a look at all the tabletop role-playing game news stories at the beginning of the week that will affect whatever's going on. And, of course, is there anything going on in the world that doesn't involve the words Wizards of the Coast? But first, content warning. This is a monetized product, which means there might be ads that show up in my video. If you are against ads on YouTube, then you probably should stop watching this now. Okay, so apology time, because sometimes my brain gets ahead of my mouth. Yesterday, I posted a thing about RPG trends I didn't understand, and I posted that I didn't really understand the whole solo, no DM, single-player RPG thing, and a lot of people are like, no, this has been around for a long time. It's really something that's really enjoyable, and I was like, oh, okay. I still don't get it, but apparently a lot of other people do. So if that's something that brings you joy, great. I totally support you. Just because this brain doesn't understand it doesn't mean that there's millions of people out there who aren't enjoying that style of play. I am an idiot. I'm also drinking coffee. Support me, Beanwater. I will sell out. All right. Let's get to the Hasbro Wizards of the Coast news first. And then we'll see if there's anything else going on in the world. Okay, so we know that Wizards of the Coast had a big conference call at the end of last week between CEO of Hasbro and CEO of Wizards of the Coast regarding the direction they wanted Wizards of the Coast to go between 2023 and 2027 as Wizards of the Coast gradually migrates from the physical world to the digital world. In the immortal words of the cyberpunk guy, and they never let me forget it. Okay, yeah, so William Gibson said, when he was, somebody said to him, William Gibson, this is the guy who invented the word cyberspace, and Gibson's response was, and you never let me forget it. I forgot William Gibson's brain for a second, because I'm old. So, the big complaint, reaction, response to that conference call is, well, Wizards of the Coast claims Dungeons & Dragons is more popular from ever, has a larger fan base than ever, is more profitable than ever, but it also claims that it's not being monetized enough and they need it to make more money. This might be a response to the fact that Hasbro projected $1 billion revenue by the end of the year from the Wizards of the Coast Magic the Gathering D&D sales, and instead Q3 ended with Hasbro in a $60 million hole and a 40% drop in stock value. Stock value dropped so low for Hasbro that is one of those rare unforeseen moments where the stockbrokers were actually telling people, sell your Hasbro stock now. So yeah, it's 50 cents on a dollar now, which is, for somebody like me who only owns 10 shares, if I sold them now, I'd get 540. But for somebody who owns hundreds and thousands of shares, that's a reasonable amount of money. So yeah, how is it you're making more money than ever, but you have no money that you need to monetize? And what did they mean about monetizing? Well, this is, of course, in response to the fact that the gradual progression of Wizards of the Coast product into the digital atmosphere. We already have D&D Beyond, and the direction D&D Beyond is going to this sort of pay-per-view, for lack of a better term, system. And we have this virtual tabletop thing that they're talking about, even though nobody's seen anything about it since Comic-Con. It's still being mentioned. Plus, there's talk about more video games and more digital content. So when they talk about monetizing and the digital content, they're talking about following something that's already been in place for a long time and that's digital marketplaces for cosmetics. If you've ever played pretty much any MMO or any video game that's come out in the last 10 years, you know that you can spend real world money to get cosmetics. In fact, there was a huge controversy a couple years ago in regards to the whole digital hat sales thing, and that these blind boxes were sort of gambling, and that you could buy, kids were spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars on basically digital product that had no real world counterpart. Oh, great. You just spent $1,000 to see that your, avatar in the video game has a different hat, or has more bouncy boobs, or has a better looking sword. There was no physical thing. So this is what they're talking about in regards to monetization. These video games that are coming forward, whether they're tie into the movies or whatever, Baldur's Gate 3 or whatever, are going to have a digital marketplace where you can spend real money to get cosmetics. In addition, D&D Beyond and the virtual tabletop will present you with these sort of generic designs for your characters, elf with bow. But then you can go to the digital marketplace, much like Hero Forge, and pay money to get the very specific looking things for your character that resemble the way you think your character looks in your brain. So instead of elf with bow, it's going to be elf with purple hair, wearing studded mail, who's got a bow that shoots purple arrows that look like teeny fireflies or something when they connect. And the more, this is going to cost you real world money to get these digital hats. Now, the other half of the monetization in regards to D&D isn't being monetized enough is add-ons, toys, gimmicks, games, supplements, splat books. As anybody who has worked in electronic retail knows, the PlayStation makes no money. You're lucky if you break even on selling PlayStations. But the peripherals, the games, the controllers, the upgrades, all that other crap, that's pretty much pure profit. Same thing with D&D. The books, the core books, make them no money. They're lucky if they break even off of the sales of Dragonlance. But the figures and the movie tie-in stuff and the dice and the maps and the action figures and the breakfast cereal, all that is pure profit. And with paper being such a expensive commodity now, they are looking towards doing more of that stuff. Now people are like, well, that's stupid. They'd never do anything like that. Well, I would remind you that in the 80s we had Dungeons & Dragons Shrinky Dinks as well as a bunch of other weird things. Anybody remember the Dungeons & Dragons Bubble Maker or the Dungeons & Dragons soap? Yeah. So, yeah, we'll see more box sets like the starter sets because those are more profit. You'll see more and more D&D tied in monetization, but less and less D&D things. They've only got like 5 things claiming for next year, though I'm sure they'll sneak in a few surprises. Continuing with Wizards of the Coast news, because we have nothing else to talk about. There's new trailers up and behind the scene looks for the Dungeons & Dragons Honor Amongst Thieves. They released a new poster. People complained about the poster, so they released another new poster, which also looks really bad. We've got to look at some of the creatures that are appearing in Dungeons & Dragons Honor Amongst Thieves, and you know what? The creatures look mostly to be physical, not CGI. They showed us a dragon and a griffin animatronic, and they look amazing. So those would be cool if nothing else. It has been pushed back again to April. Remember, it was pushed back to March, the end of the month. Well, now it looks like Dungeons & Dragons Honor Amongst Thieves has been pushed back to, I guess, April, at least April 1st, or probably April 2nd, because April 1st is a horrible day to release a movie, even if it is a Friday. So, yeah, it got pushed back again to sometime in April of 2023. And then, finally, hopefully this is it. Let me just check. Yeah, it looks like this is the last one. Wizards of the Coast on Thursday posted in their job section on the Wizards of the Coast job board that they are looking for a new head of creative for D&D / Wizards of the Coast. A new head of creative for / D&D Wizards of the Coast. And people are always like, well, that job was already replaced, wasn't it? That was the job that Ray Winnegar had that got replaced. And nope, this is a brand new job. Head of creative for D&D. So the guy that replaced Ray Winnegar, he's still there, but now they're looking to replace another position. Now, currently, the quote-unquote head of creative / head writer for Dungeons & Dragons is Crawford and Perkins. Now, this says to me that they might be looking to replace one or both of them. This should have come as no surprise to anyone because they have been the figurehead for every word that has come out of Wizards of the Coast's mouth, which means all the negative press that Wizards of the Coast has received has sort of been directed at Crawford and Perkins. And a lot of times Crawford says something, and then a day later, Perkins has to come on and reiterate, well, this is what Crawford meant. So yeah, every time Crawford opens his mouth, it seems to make things worse, and then they have to send Chris Perkins out there as the sacrificial lamb to go, oh no, this is what we meant when Crawford said X. Now, following that, we can look at Crawford's main project that isn't D&D related that he's most notable for, and that is when he took over as Dungeons Master for Acquisitions Incorporated and began running it when Chris stepped down. Nobody really knew why Chris stepped down. There was some, speculation, and he was just tired and whatever. But shortly after Crawford took over, a lot of the cast of Acquisitions Incorporated stopped showing up. The guy who played the elf rogue stopped showing up. The guy who played Jim Darkmagic, after a while, just stopped showing up. Didn't want to do it anymore. A lot of people were like, well, is this because of Crawford? Well, over the last weekend, during PAX, Crawford brought his run of Acquisitions Incorporated to an end and ended Acquisitions Incorporated, even though shortly thereafter they announced that there will be a new season of Acquisitions Incorporated, a brand new Acquisitions Incorporated starting in 2023 and 2024, which apparently Crawford might not be DMing and would include the return of Jim Darkmagic. So, between the announcement that Hasbro is looking for a new head of creative and the fact that Crawford just ended Acquisitions Incorporated and stepped down as the DM, and the fact that when Acquisitions Incorporated did its final broadcast, only one member of the original team showed up, and he wasn't planning to, from what I've been told. So, could it be that Hasbro is looking to replace Crawford with somebody who's a little bit more approachable and palatable and a little less egotistical? Well, either Crawford's gone or Perkins is gone is my bet, but I could be wrong. I don't think they're making a new position. It's more likely they're replacing someone. And finally, in regards to Wizards of the Coast, there's a trailer up for Baldur's Gate 3. Speaking of how we were talking about digital monetization, Baldur's Gate 3 is coming up, including having Minsk and Boo as playable characters, and a whole bunch of new things, including things you can get like cloth maps, key rings, sticker sheets, Magic the Gathering booster packs, statues, collectible edition things, all that you can buy through the online marketplace. Let's take a break. And now for non-Wizards of the Coast gaming news. Modifius / Mephidius announced that the 2D20-based Conan Adventures in the Age of Dreamed Of role-playing game will cease production as the license will end. All upcoming products for the line have been canceled, and no restocks of product will be ordered. And also, there's a huge sale of the Conan stuff on the Modifius site. A new publisher will be taking over, a European company, and it will most likely be 5e. Seems to be the hint. Maybe. Gloomhaven, the board game / video game, is getting a role-playing game. Then it's already on the list for most anticipated role-playing games of 2023. Don't know much about it. All we just know is it's based upon Gloomhaven and its sequel Frosthaven, and will follow, I guess, the story of the board game and all its expansions and have similar races and classes and combat systems, at least inspired by the game. Doesn't say if it's 5e or if it's its own system yet, but we do know they have a Gloomhaven tabletop role-playing game out, which means more Gloomhaven figures. And yeah, it is already on the list for most anticipated tabletop role-playing game of 2023. Also, Nightfall Games have partnered with Mantic Games to take over production of the Hellboy RPG. I guess you didn't know, but yes, there is a Hellboy RPG. And now it is being converted to a 5e system and continuing the feel of the previous existing Hellboy RPG. Fragging Unicorn Games announced the tabletop role-playing game Subversion coming to Kickstarter. This is a cyberpunk fantasy role-playing game that takes place in the same universe as their miniature war game, Gangs of the Other City, and will place players in the roles of individuals running around this cyberpunk magic rebellion setting. So basically, Shadowrun. Again, but from a different company. Kickstarter goes live in January, and we should see a physical product of some sort by the end of the year. And that's it. We end with where we began. Wizards of the Coast reviews for Spelljammer are finally done, and the final look at Spelljammer in regards to how the industry has responded to it is finally coming to an end, and most of it is just, this probably could have been fine if it just didn't make such a big deal. And why didn't you include space combat rules? It's a game about space combat. You didn't include space combat rules. So most people are disappointed. In regards to the reviews from Dragonlance, whose physical copy should be available today, so far the reviews have been, it wasn't what I expected. They did the bare minimum of work, and it's kind of a hard read. There you go. So that's all the Wizards of the Coast news. Now I know people have said, you don't know what you're talking about. You're making this shit up. But in response to that, there are links down below to the articles where I get the information from. And speaking of links, if you're looking to do some holiday shopping and you haven't picked up stuff for the favorite gamer in your life yet, you could do worse than going to my online store at Redbubble and picking up some OGGM merch. Also, every issue of the Fistful of Minions Monster Manual is up on Big Geek Emporium. I just posted the most recent one. Last one for the year, which is special look at various beasts converted to the OSR. So if you're looking for some inexpensive OSR supplements to provide you with tons of monsters to throw at your players and tons of alternatives, check out my product line on Big Geek Emporium. Check out my merch. Don't forget, best way you can celebrate the holidays is to subscribing and supporting the OGGM as we barrel into 2023 monetized and sponsored and generally being a nuisance. Till next time, stay safe. It is wet and rainy out there. And get off my holiday land, you damn holiday Grinches with your flying reindeer.